feel like you're just stuck in this meeting vortex?
Oh, yeah.
Where time just disappears and nothing gets accomplished.
For sure. We've all been there. We know meetings are important, but they could be so much better.
So today, we're going to go beyond just complaining, right?
Right.
We're going to dive deep into some practical strategies to make meetings actually matter.
I love it. Let's do it.
Okay. So we're looking at this webinar from the Iowa Health and Human Services Department.
Okay.
And it's led by trainer and coach Angie Asa-Lovstad.
Cool.
It's full of advice on how to create more productive environments.
Angie highlights 5 key elements for engagement and productivity.
Okay.
And the first one that really grabbed my attention was psychological safety.
That makes sense. If people aren't comfortable speaking up, you're missing out on all those ideas.
Yeah.
How do you actually create that in a meeting?
It's all about fostering an environment where people can express their ideas without fear of judgment or ridicule.
Yeah.
Think about a time when you felt comfortable sharing your thoughts. What made that space feel safe?
I guess it's about feeling respected and heard, even if your ideas are different.
Right.
So is that something the facilitator can control?
Absolutely. Angie says effective facilitation techniques are so important.
Okay.
For managing discussions and making sure everyone feels valued.
So it's more than just keeping things on schedule.
Oh, for sure. It's about guiding the conversation to encourage open dialogue and feedback.
So psychological safety sets the stage, and effective facilitation keeps things moving.
Yeah.
What are the other things that Angie talks about?
She emphasizes evidence-based programs and strategies. You know, things with a proven track record of success.
So not just winging it.
No.
Okay.
Grounding your approach in research and data.
Being intentional.
Yes.
What was number 4?
Managing organizational change.
Right.
Change is inevitable.
It is.
But Angie provides insights on how to guide teams through those transitions, right?
Yeah.
In a way that minimizes disruptions.
Okay. So we have psychological safety, facilitation, evidence-based programs, managing change.
And the final piece is sustainability.
Okay.
This goes beyond the environment. It's about choosing methods and practices that support long-term viability and have a reduced negative impact.
On the people and the environment.
Yes.
I see a theme here. It's about approaching meetings with a more holistic mindset.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture of mindful collaboration.
Yeah.
Now the webinar dives into this often overlooked art of listening.
Ooh, here's where it gets interesting. I think we could all use a refresher.
Absolutely. Angie distinguishes between 2 types of listening.
Okay.
Listening to understand and listening to respond.
I think most of us are familiar with that second one.
Yeah, that tendency to already be thinking of our response while the other person's talking.
Totally guilty.
I know, me too.
My brain is already crafting my response before they even finish.
Been there.
Yeah.
But the webinar, drawing on the work of Simon Sinek, emphasizes that truly effective listening, the kind that builds trust and connection, requires a different approach.
So it's about shifting from listening to respond to listening to understand.
Right.
But how do we actually make that shift?
The webinar uses this great visual. Imagine pouring water onto a sponge.
Okay.
That's what happens when we truly listen. We absorb information. We soak it in.
I can see that. What's the opposite?
Think about water running off a brick wall.
Ooh.
That's what happens when we're just waiting for our turn to talk. It just bounces right off.
I've been that brick wall.
We all have. The key is to recognize these patterns and make an effort to change.
So how do we move from brick wall to sponge?
Simon Sinek suggests replacing judgment with curiosity. It's about genuinely wanting to understand their perspective.
Even if you don't agree.
Even if you don't agree.
So going into a conversation with an open mind, not an agenda.
Exactly. And that ties back to psychological safety. When people feel safe to share, genuine dialogue can flourish.
We've talked about psychological safety and shifting from listening to respond to listening to understand. But what happens when that doesn't happen? What happens when people feel unheard?
Yeah, that's a great point. The webinar notes really highlight the effects of feeling unheard, unseen, or disrespected.
Right.
It can really damage relationships and trust and create just a bad environment.
I can relate to that feeling of like being invisible, like your thoughts don't matter.
Absolutely. And that's where the heard, seen, respected framework, or HSR, comes in.
Okay, what is that?
It's a structured activity designed to shift those communication patterns. It creates a more empathetic and productive environment.
I like it already. Tell me more.
Okay, so the setup is pretty simple.
Okay.
You arrange chairs in a circle, facing each other, no tables.
Got it.
It's all about face-to-face communication.
It already feels more intimate than a typical conference room.
Exactly. That's the whole point.
Okay.
The first step, each person shares a story about a time they felt unheard.
Okay, so building that shared experience.
Yes. That understanding that we've all been there.
Yeah.
And the listeners, they just listen.
Okay.
No interrupting, no solutions.
Just listen.
Yeah, just clarifying questions like what else or what happened next.
So really giving them space to share their experience.
Exactly. Then the pairs, they reflect on what it felt like to be the storyteller and the listener.
Interesting.
So you're not just sharing, you're processing.
Okay.
Then those pairs, they form groups of 4.
Okay.
And start to look for patterns in the stories they shared.
So identifying themes and trends.
Yes, exactly. And this step is crucial because it helps surface unconscious biases.
Oh, wow.
Or habits we might not even realize we have.
Like a mirror to how we interact.
Yeah, exactly. And finally, the whole group comes together to discuss the patterns and brainstorms ways to use HSR.
To address those challenges.
Exactly. One of the biggest takeaways from the webinar notes is this.
Yeah.
When you are the listener, notice when you form a judgment, then let it go.
Wow. So resist giving advice and just be present.
Yes. Powerful, right? Sometimes the best thing we can do is just listen with empathy.
No judgment.
Exactly.
This makes me think about how often we rush to fix things without truly understanding the problem.
Right. We need to ask more questions and really listen to the answers.
Shift from I know what's best to I want to understand.
Exactly.
So we've covered psychological safety, listening to understand, and the HSR framework. What about running a meeting? How do we avoid those common pitfalls? You know, the things that turn a meeting into a waste of time.
Right. The webinar goes into this. They even had a top 10 agenda fails list.
Oh, I bet we can all relate to that.
I'm sure. Things like mystery topics where the agenda is so vague.
Oh, yeah.
Or endless monologues where one person just talks the whole time.
Oh, I've been in those.
And of course, unrealistic time frames, trying to cram too much in.
Ugh, so stressful.
So how do we avoid these?
Yeah, what's the secret?
Go back to basics. Clear agendas assign tasks, realistic time frames.
This isn't simple enough.
It is, but we often overcomplicate things.
Right.
A good agenda is like a roadmap. It keeps everyone on track.
Yeah.
Assigning tasks ensures everyone has a role.
Accountability.
Exactly. But how do we move beyond assigning tasks to shared ownership?
I like that. How do we do that?
The webinar talks about the team report.
Okay. Tell me more.
It's a better version of the traditional report out.
Okay.
Instead of just summarizing what they've done, teams use a structured report with a what's next section.
Yeah, interesting.
This shifts the focus from the past to planning for the future.
I like that. Forward thinking.
And assigning responsibility for those next steps.
So it's proactive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It distributes the workload more evenly.
Instead of everything falling on one person.
Yes. Everyone shares the responsibility.
That's great. That brings us back to psychological safety.
Right.
When people feel trusted, they step up.
Absolutely. It's all connected.
Yeah.
From how we listen to how we structure meetings.
It all contributes to a more effective team.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered a lot in this deep dive. Psychological safety, active listening, the HSR framework, tips for running meetings, and
it really is all about changing how we see meetings, not as like these dreaded things, but as opportunities to connect and collaborate and be creative, you know?
I like that. Before we wrap up, can we go back to something you mentioned earlier?
Sure.
Liberating structures.
Oh, yeah.
You said the HSR framework is an example, but what are they exactly?
So liberating structures are a collection of these like frameworks designed to unlock creativity and engagement in groups. They're like recipes for having good interactions with clear steps and variations to fit different needs.
So it's not just one activity, it's a toolbox of different structures.
Exactly. And they give you a way to facilitate meetings and workshops that encourages people to participate.
I like that.
And really tap into the group's wisdom, you know?
That's cool. I might have to look into those.
Yeah, definitely.
Any other big takeaways you want to mention before we finish up?
One thing that really struck me from the webinar was the focus on mindfulness.
Oh, interesting.
Both in how we communicate and how we listen.
Yeah.
Being present, paying attention to our own thoughts and feelings, and approaching everything with curiosity and openness.
It's so easy to get caught up in our own stuff, though.
It really is. But bringing that mindfulness to meetings creates a much better environment for everyone.
Absolutely.
And remember, it's a journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
Transforming your meeting culture doesn't happen overnight.
Small steps.
Yeah, try 1 or 2 new things and see how it goes.
This deep dive has given me a lot to think about.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited to try some of these ideas out. Thanks for all this.
My pleasure. Meetings don't have to be a drag.
Right.
By focusing on psychological safety, active listening, and good facilitation, we can make them engaging, productive, and, dare I say, enjoyable.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See you later.